Well, Olivier Guitta is a managing director, of Global Strat, which is an international security and geopolitical risk consultancy firm. I asked him what he made of the fact that Amri had been able to travel so far before he was eventually stopped.
First, we should remember that if it were not for pure luck of a routine ID check, this man would be walking freely the streets of Milan and possibly reaching out to accomplices and plotting another terror attack in any of the European countries. So this shows a failure of intel, a failure of sharing of information. And this shows that the Schengen Accord is making it much more easier for terrorists to win over our system.
Of course, you could look at it from the other perspective and saying, well, it was sheer luck, but the fact that he was apprehended, or at least he was confronted and challenged, shows that the security systems that are in place, whether by luck or otherwise, are working to a certain extent, aren't
they? Yes, but he was wrong in picking that place. I mean, if you look at the details, he arrived in Milan at 3 a.m. in an area where it's full of drug trafficking and full of cops all the time. So it was pure luck and not good, smart thinking on his part. So yes, it's working because he was in a neighborhood that was really patrolled by Italian police. But at the same time, the German authorities, until very late, thought he was still in Berlin. So that's the problem that we have in terms of border crossing, is that the whole of Europe was looking for him. And, as I said, he could be walking the streets freely today. And we missed him.
And what is it particularly, from your point of view, that is flawed about the Schengen agreement? Is it the inability to contain criminals within a national border?
It is basically the interesting experiment happened with France and Belgium that decided to suspend the Schengen Accords after the attacks in Paris and Brussels. The French, in about 6 months, if I'm correct, stopped about 20,000 people that were not supposed to be able to enter France. And we can imagine that there were many holes. So if in 6 months you catch so many people that are not supposed to be in your country, something is wrong. And that if you had actual borders, you would not let 20,000 people that are not supposed to be in. So that's number one. Second issue, and I think that's the most relevant at this point, is the fact that people not only are traveling within those borders freely, when they're not European citizens. But on top of it, in this particular case, Amri was an illegal that had spent 4 years in jail in Italy. And then he could just move, still as an illegal, to Switzerland for just a week and then to go to Germany. Something is really wrong in the system when an illegal is arrested in Italy and for torching a center, and why wasn't it sent home? Especially since Italy is the country in Europe that deports the most illegals. I'm baffled at the fact that he was staying all that time in jail. And then
that the broader lessons, though, from this week, this momentous week, starting with the attack in Berlin on Monday? What are the broader lessons when it comes to security that we should be learning? Should an attack of this nature have perhaps been better anticipated, given the events in Nice in the summer?
You are exactly correct. The issue is not a failure of imagination, because before Nice, I mean, except a few experts that were looking at this, in the past few years about the issue of using vehicles and lorries as weapons, the law enforcement wasn't looking at this. But the question is, as you hinted, is that how come a Christmas market in Germany was not protected by pure, simple concrete barriers, and that they didn't think that a copycat attack like in Nice could happen in Germany? That's number one. Second, there were numerous warnings, official and non-official warnings, about a risk of attacks on Christmas markets in Europe, especially coming from the US State Department. We basically said Europe is red during the Christmas season, and especially Christmas markets. If this comes into the public, how come Germany didn't implement any kind of security around this? And then the last point is Moroccan security services specifically warned Germany both in October and November about Amri himself being on the verge of planning an attack in the country.
Obviously, there are so many lessons to be learned. To what extent, though, should we be looking at the person responsible and considering what his biography tells us, if you like? As often is the case now, not always, but as often is the case, there has been a release of a video from Islamic State showing Amri apparently pledging his allegiance to so-called Islamic State. What can we learn from him biographically, perhaps about his route to radicalism?
Look, I think we wouldn't even come to that in terms of radicalization, because in this case, is different. It's not homegrown terrorism. It's somebody that came directly illegally from Tunisia. So we have another layer, if you will, of information that could have been stopped at the get-go when the Italians arrested him. So that's one. The second, in terms of radicalization, obviously, it happened through recruitment of a man in charge of Germany for Islamic State called Abu Wala, who basically his mission was to recruit German residents to perpetrate attacks in Germany, because Islamic State had a very difficult time recruiting members, if you will, in Germany compared to France or Belgium, where they had people lined up to join and blow themselves up. So looking at this, basically the radicalization happened through recruitment directly from Islamic State, but also from different Salafist mosques. So we all go back to two issues that people keep on forgetting. It's not only social media, it's that is basically the main route to radicalization, but it's still first and foremost radical mosques in Western Europe funded by very extreme regimes in the Gulf.
Yes, Olivier Guitta, who's the Managing Director of Global Strat, an international security and geopolitical risk consultancy.